They'd found more than evidence linking his sisters and Autumn's abductions. They'd found Gage Reed. The shooter who'd been waiting in the shadows for Autumn had a name. Bennett swiped his finger across his phone's screen as he read the bastard's file. Staff Sergeant Gage Reed had been a sniper for the Marine Corps, received a hell of a lot of medals while in service to his country, and was technically retired. At least, according to the documents Blackhawk's network security analyst Elizabeth Dawson had sent to Bennett's phone. But more often than not, men like Reed never really retired. They just went into the private sector and came out mercs. Reed had been hired, but getting his illegal financials would take time they didn't have, not with Autumn's life at stake. Any employer willing to hire a merc to tie up loose ends wasn't the kind to wait for their asset to get out of jail. Whoever'd hired the bastard would send another shooter and another, until Autumn was dead. The light scent of vanilla dove deep into his lungs, and Bennett locked his attention on the sleeping woman with her head in his lap, counted her even breaths. Autumn was safe. For now. He'd relocated them to one of the firm's safe houses just outside the city limits. More of a cabin than a house, but the surrounding trees would keep them off Reed's employer's radar until they could come up with a plan. He brushed a strand of hair away from her face, smooth skin sliding beneath his fingertips. Hell. She was in over her head, but despite the fact someone had tried to kill her less than 6 hours ago, Autumn hadn't let it show since leaving the crime scene. She'd slammed her professional demeanor into place, as he imagined she'd done with so many patients in her oncology practice, and held on to it tight. Those blue eyes had stayed steady on him, a calm right in the middle of the storm. He dropped his hand, his gut tight. Gage Reed had claimed Bella was dead, confirming what he knew to be true in the back of his mind. As soon as he recovered her body for a proper burial, the investigation into his sister's disappearance would be over. So why did the thought of walking away from the woman in his arms twist his insides? Damn it, Bella. What the hell had she gotten herself into? His eyes burned as adrenaline burned off and reality set in. His sister was gone. She wasn't coming back, and the past year spent trying to find her had been for nothing. Bennett swiped at his face as Autumn shifted in his lap. Hey! Voice groggy from sleep, she straightened those mesmerizing blue eyes locking on his. She reached for him, set her hand against his jaw, and a flood of warmth raced through him. Are you okay? Yes. No. Hell, he didn't know what to say to that. He'd gotten the answer he'd been searching for so long, but this thing was far from over. Autumn was still at risk, and he couldn't lose her too. They're never going to touch you. Then he kissed her. His mouth crashed down on hers, and the primitive attraction she'd felt for him over the past couple days exploded. Threading his fingers in her hair, Bennett pulled her against him, and she came willingly. Because with one pass of his lips over hers, the fear, the uncertainty, the nightmares, it all vanished. The only thing left was him. He kissed her deeper, harder, and a soft moan at the back of her throat escaped, without her control locked in place. You taste exactly as I remember cupcake, like vanilla. Tell me that's a good thing, and I'll let you kiss me again. A laugh burst from her, a real, genuine laugh she hadn't felt in, she couldn't remember how long. His smile stirred something deep within her, and Autumn sank into the addicting sensation of being the center of his desire, his want, his need. They'd been running off adrenaline the past 2 days. 2 people thrown together in a high-stress situation such as theirs. She wouldn't make more of this than it really was. But the thought of never seeing him again after the investigation ended, she didn't want to think about that right now.
"I'm not complaining," he said.
"Then why are you still talking?" Her heart threatened to beat straight out of her chest, as though it intended to reach out for him. She'd listened to Bella's stories about her brother, how he'd enlisted straight into the army after 9/11, how he'd set out to save the world one tour at a time. He was a good man, a good brother, and a fantastic kisser. Good question. Bennett pulled her into his lap. The crackling fire a few feet away enhanced the shadows in his eyes. But right then, Autumn wanted him more than ever. Wanted to smooth the hardness from his expression, if only for a night. That one night with you all those months ago wasn't enough. Another smile stretched her mouth thin as he echoed her thoughts. She pressed her lips to his. "Does that mean we get to see where this goes after the case is closed? After they found the people responsible for hurting Bella?" Dull ringing reached her ears. Hold that thought. "Elizabeth might have our shooter's financials already." Bennett flipped his phone over from the arm of the couch, swiping his thumb across the screen. "But we're not done talking about this." He put the phone to his ear. Yeah, muted conversation registered from the other line, but Autumn only had attention for the lines of muscle disappearing beneath his t-shirt. Free hand framed around her jaw, he planted a soft kiss to the tendon between her neck and shoulder. But the hardness etched into his expression returned as he pulled back. "Thanks." Bennett ended the call, moving her off his lap before shoving to his feet. He ran a hand through his hair, then spun, throwing his phone hard against the opposite wall, and she jumped in place. Veins fought to break through his skin down along his arms as he raised his fiery gaze to hers. Gage Reed was released from police custody. He slammed the butt of a fresh magazine into his Glock and holstered the weapon. Gage Reed was free probably thanks to whoever'd hired him to take out Autumn in the first place. But that freedom wouldn't last long. Bennett would make sure of it. The heat Autumn had generated in his veins from her kiss cooled. They'd run out of time. Stay away from the windows and doors. Pulling his backup weapon from his ankle, he handed it to her grip first. "If someone tries to get in, anyone use this. Safety's here." He positioned her thumb just above the trigger and forced her to compress the release. "Trigger here. You point and shoot. Understand I'll be back as soon as I can." "Where are you going?" She hesitated as she took the gun from him, her fingers sliding against his. Intoxicating warmth stretched through him at the contact, but he couldn't focus on that. Blackhawk Security took on cases Anchorage PD couldn't or wouldn't, and it was time for him to do his damn job. He'd put an end to this once and for all, after Gage Reed. Bennett strained to take a deep breath to keep her scent with him as long as his lungs could stand it as he slid his knuckles down her jawline. No matter what happened, the mercenary would never get to her again. As long as he's breathing cupcake, you're not safe. The ocean blue depths of her eyes hardened as she fisted her hands in his t-shirt. "Do you really believe that? Or are you just looking for an excuse to take down the man who killed your sister?" "What, Autumn? Are you going after him to protect me? Or to get your revenge?" "It's a simple enough question, Bennett." She let him go, took a step back, and he found himself missing her touch. "I have first-hand experience with what Gage Reed is capable of. And there's a very real danger that you won't walk back through that door after this is finished. So think about why you're doing this. Why you want to be the one to catch him and who you'll be leaving behind if you go. Her. Was that what this was about? He had to make a choice. Her or bringing a killer to justice. A hollowness took up residence in his gut, pulling at him from inside, but certainty burned through him. Gage Reed wouldn't get away with what he'd done. He killed my sister Autumn. So I guess you're right. The choice is simple. If you're telling me I have to choose between bringing Bella's killer to justice or the woman responsible for her getting kidnapped in the first place, we have nothing left to talk about. She flinched away. Bennett regretted the words the moment they left his mouth, but it was too late. Maneuvering around her, he headed for the cabin's front door. Gage Reed would disappear the second he got the chance. He had to get moving. You still blame me for what happened to her. Her voice softened, bordering on the brink of a sob, and his heart jerked in his chest. Even after everything we've been through, he reached for the doorknob but didn't dare look back. Lock the door behind me. Autumn gripped the gun in her hand, tried to control the shaking. Didn't help. How could she have been so stupid? How could she have thought, for even a delirious, passionate moment, he'd forgive her for what happened to Bella? She swallowed around the tightness clawing up her throat. Her friend was assumed dead, and now the only man who could help her had walked out the front door of their safe house. Her eyes burned the ache behind her sternum, constricting her breathing. He blamed her for his sister's death, despite the proof she'd uncovered, but every cell in her body urged her to go after him right now. She couldn't let their last conversation be the end. Not after everything they'd been through. He'd saved her life, but it was more than that. When it came right down to it, he'd pulled her from the soul-sucking obsession of finding Bella. He'd given her hope, given her the ability to see past the investigation and look forward to the future. A future with him. Because she'd fallen for him. Air rushed from her lungs, and she swiped her hand across her face to get rid of the tears. 2 days. That was all it had taken, which on a logical level seemed impossible. But she'd known him for years. With Bella's stories of her heroic brother, with their one night together, with the connection they'd shared since she showed up on his doorstep, wet and bleeding. And he was just going to throw that all away now. They weren't finished. Not by a long shot. She set the gun down and shoved her arms into the coat she'd grabbed from her house before Anchorage PD took control of the scene. Within a minute, she hit the front steps. A blistering wave of an Alaska breeze brushed against her, but she fought back the chill. Snow-covered trees surrounded the cabin, cutting off any chance she had of spotting Bennett down the road. Didn't matter. She wasn't following him. The man who'd abducted her was a self-proclaimed killer, a professional who'd been hired to kill Bella. Kill her. Bennett couldn't bring these people down alone. She'd been a doctor she didn't know how to fight, but after 8 years of medical school, she'd developed the skills to investigate the deeper root of a problem. And that meant she had to go to the source, to whoever'd hired Gage Reed in the first place. Autumn pulled her phone from her pocket and hit the app to request a rideshare. Bella's research notes hadn't specified which pharmaceutical company had hired her to develop the drug she'd been working on, but there was only one lab in the entire city that had the equipment Bella would have needed to finish her research. And if her memory served her right, bingo. She tapped on the address for Genism Core, a private lab that catered to a handful of pharmaceutical companies from across the country. And it was right in the city. Got you. You're not getting away that easily. Bennett dropped the binoculars onto the passenger seat of his company SUV. For a professional hitman, former Staff Sergeant Gage Reed wasn't too concerned about keeping a low profile. The target rounded the hood of his own vehicle after stepping out the front door of his lawyer's office. Hadn't been too hard to get the shooter's location from the Anchorage PD, especially given how many cases Blackhawk Security had solved for their brothers in blue in the past year alone. The bastard hiked a pair of sunglasses onto his face, studying the street like the good mercenary he was supposed to be. An alert on his phone pulled Bennett's attention to the screen. The alarm at the safe house had been disabled. That meant, damn it. He tossed his cell next to the binoculars and hit the ignition beside the steering wheel. Of course, he should have known she wouldn't stay put. The woman had closed her oncology practice to investigate his sister's abduction, given up everything to make things right. Why would she want to stay in a protected safe house when a professional hitman had her in the crosshairs? He'd lied to her before. True, he'd blamed her for what had happened to Bella before, but now adrenaline dumped into his veins because she was out there alone, probably trying to help him close this investigation. Because that was the kind of woman she was. Determined, passionate, caring. Even if she had to put herself at risk. And hell, he loved that about her. He wiped at his face. He loved a lot more than that about her. Loved the idea of waking up to her smile every morning, of running his hands through her hair, tracing the birthmark on her hip. He'd be damned if he let his revenge get in the way of that. I'm coming for you, Cupcake. His driver's side window shattered glass, cutting into the left side of his neck, face, and arm. His vision blurred as rough hands fisted in his jacket and pulled him from the vehicle. Gage Reed hauled him to his feet and slammed Bennett back into the SUV, the air knocking from his lungs. You just don't know when to quit, do you, Spencer? Some people would say that's a positive trait, but the way you said it makes me think it wasn't a compliment. Bennett wrenched out of the bastard's hold and threw the first punch. Bone met flesh in a sickening crunch, and Gage Reed backed off, holding his bleeding nose. Really? I'm not here to fight you, man. Gage straightened, pinching the bridge of his nose. Blood coated his light-colored beard. Damn, you have a great right hook. Thank you, but I'm still sending you an invoice for the window. None of this made sense. Bennett unholstered his weapon. Just in case. If you're not here to kill me, then what the hell are you doing? I'm here to tell you Bella's safe and alive. I had to be sure you weren't sent by the same guy who hired me to kill her. Gage Reed wiped the blood from beneath his nose. And to tell you he's not going to stop hunting Autumn Staver. S. Haddows shifted down the hallway as Autumn put one foot in front of the other, flashlight in hand. Genisum's research labs branched off the main corridor, millions of dollars of shiny white equipment nestled inside each one of them. So why had the front door been left unlocked this late at night? Where was the security guard? A clang of metal echoed down the hallway, freezing her in place. Panic consumed her head to toe. Gripped tight around the flashlight, she maneuvered inside the nearest lab, in case the guard had only been on rounds, and finally released a strong exhale. Bella Spencer should be listed as a researcher if she'd stepped foot inside this lab. Autumn just had to find the records room to prove it. No further sounds registered down the hall. Rolling her lips between her teeth, she bit down as she moved deeper into the lab. Metallic gold signs beside each door reflected the beam of her flashlight. Laboratory 3. 4. Autumn slowed. Records. Glancing down the hallway in both directions, she pushed her way inside and closed the door behind her as quietly as possible. She was trespassing. She'd be charged with breaking and entering if she was caught, but finding the people responsible for taking Bella, that was all that mattered. For her, for Bennett. She flipped the light on disappointment coiling in her gut. You've got to be kidding me. A single desktop computer glared back at her, a password box in the center of the screen. There weren't any physical records for her to search. They'd all been digitized. Closing the distance between her and the desk, she pulled open the main drawer beneath the keyboard. Password. Password. Please let someone have written down the password. If Bennett had been with her, she was sure he would have just called someone on his team to break into the server, but he wasn't. He didn't want anything to do with her, and that truth sat like a rock at the base of her spine. Would he ever forgive her for what happened that night? Would he ever realize she'd have to live with the consequences of her choice for the rest of her life?
I'm afraid you're out of luck on that one, Ms. Staver, an unfamiliar voice said from behind.
Autumn twisted around, but not in time to avoid the 2 electrodes sinking into her skin at the base of her neck. Electric currents forced her to her knees, tightening her hold on the flashlight. She collapsed as wave after wave of agony tore through her, the edges of her vision exploding with white lightning. She couldn't scream, couldn't move as her attacker centered himself in front of her.
We haven't officially met.
His knees cracked as he crouched beside her. Graying hair and beard, circular wire frame glasses, 3 distinct lines between his eyebrows. Autumn struggled to lift the flashlight, the only weapon she had within reach. Eli Helton of Helton Pharmaceuticals, but I think you already know that.
Can't say I know much about you, Ms. Staver, other than your proclivity for sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Then again, sometimes it's nice meeting the people I contract to have killed.
His sister was alive, at least according to the hitman sent to kill her, the hitman hired by Eli Helton of Helton Pharmaceuticals. But he didn't have time to process the news. Not yet. Not with Autumn's life still in danger. Bennett pushed the SUV harder as he dialed Autumn's phone for the 10th, or was it the 11th time? Straight to voicemail. Good thing Elizabeth had been able to ping her last location. A place called Genism Corp, a research lab. What the hell she'd been doing there, he had no idea, but he'd find out. Because getting to her, there was no other option. Rain smeared across the windshield, the wipers battling rivulets of water, as the beep at the end of her message rang loud in his ears.
Autumn, I need you to pick up the damn phone.
2 seconds passed. 3. I didn't mean it what I said. I don't blame you for what happened to Bella. He tightened his grip around the steering wheel, knuckles white against the dark leather air lodged in his throat. Glancing at his phone's screen in the holder, he counted off the seconds. Oh, by the way, she's alive. Just hiding out from the people who want her dead.
Yeah, it's a long story, but even if she'd been killed, I wouldn't blame you, Cupcake. I need you to call me back. I need to know you're safe.
Bennett ended the call, only the patter of rain on the windshield breaking through the silence. The muted concrete sign of Genism Corp came into view, and he maneuvered the SUV into the parking lot. No other vehicles. No way to tell if Autumn was still in the building. The hairs on the back of his neck rose on end, or if anyone else would be waiting inside. Loading a different magazine into his Glock, he clicked off the safety and reholstered the weapon beneath his jacket. No movement, but his instincts said he'd come to the right place. Bennett shouldered out of the vehicle and hit the pavement. Rain soaked through his hair and clothing, but he didn't give a damn.
Autumn was the only one who mattered now. Not his revenge. Not his sister's apparent resurrection. Only her. He closed in on the front door and wrenched it open. Darkness greeted him inside. This isn't creepy at all. He unholstered his weapon, clearing room after room until he hit the end of the main hallway. Nothing but science equipment and a tearing sound he couldn't place. Last room. Bennett swung in, gun raised, and froze as rage took control. "Sergeant Spencer, how nice of you to join us." With a gun in his hand, the man standing behind Autumn rounded to her side. Duct tape covered her mouth and secured her wrists and ankles in the chair. Bright blue eyes widened as she shook her head, but her pleas were muffled by the tape. The bastard with the gun took aim. At Autumn. You're just in time. She didn't want to die. Not here. Not like this. And not by the man who'd had her best friend killed. Her screams barely made it past the duct tape secured at her mouth. Autumn gripped her fingertips into the chair until pain lightened up her arms. She had to warn him, had to get to the tape. Didn't he understand the barrel of Helton's gun pressed against her temple? The second Bennett pulled the trigger, she was dead. "Do I know you?" Bennett kept the gun level. He took a single step forward. "You know what, don't answer. I don't care who you are or why you decided to send a hitman after my sister and to kidnap Autumn. I'm just going to shoot you. One more move, and I pull the trigger, Sergeant." Helton increased the pressure on her temple with the gun, wrenching her head back with his free hand. "Do you know what would have happened if I'd let Dr. Spencer go to the FDA with her report? Helton Pharmaceuticals would have been buried under thousands of lawsuits that would have lasted decades. She would have cost me everything." Helton let the gun slip from her temple, and Autumn nodded at Bennett. He had to make his move. "Now, I paid her hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop a drug to cure cancer, and what did she do with it? Refused to follow through. Came in here yelling about how the drug wasn't ready for human trials. So yes, I sent a hitman after her and after Ms. Staver here when she wouldn't accept that her friend was dead. And I saved my legacy in the process. You got that?" Bennett tapped his ear, then nodded. Good. Confusion flooded through her. Was he recording Helton's confession? Sirens echoed through the lab, red and blue patrol lights skimming the walls. Tension drained from her body as reality set in. He'd had his team and the police department on backup. Anchorage PD is very interested in Gage Reed's story of how you hired him to take out Bennett Spencer, and Autumn Staver, interested in the proof of payment he handed over too. Bennett's dark gaze flickered to her, the amusement disappearing from his expression as Helton tightened his hold in her hair. "Now I'm going to give you to the count of 3 to drop your weapon before I shoot you for pointing a gun at my woman." His woman, did that mean? Autumn shook her head. No, Helton would shoot her the second Bennett fired, one Bennett said. "Gage Reed wouldn't give me up. I pay him too well." Helton shifted his weight between his feet, but wouldn't release his hold on her. "And you're bluffing. There's nobody on the other side of that earpiece." 2. Tension tightened the muscles down her spine as the former Army investigator pinned her with his gaze. He winked at her, something in his eyes asking her to trust him. And she did, wholeheartedly. Because she loved him. Autumn squeezed her eyes shut. 3. Bennett pulled the trigger. "You can open your eyes now, Cupcake." Bennett smoothed the pad of his thumb across the duct tape over her mouth. "Nobody's going to hurt you ever again." Bright blue eyes blinked open, focusing on him,
and his gut heated. Footsteps pounded down the corridor, overwhelming Eli Helton's moans from a few feet away. The bastard would live. Nobody had ever died from a rubber bullet to the thigh. Anchorage PD rushed inside, guns raised, and Bennett holstered his weapon. The scent of vanilla wrapped around him, bringing him to his knees in front of her. Gently, he peeled the duct tape away from her lips, then her hands and feet. "You're safe." "Thank you." Autumn studied her abductor as uniformed officers pulled him to his feet in cuffs. "I was searching for proof Bella had used this facility when he caught me by surprise. I thought he was going to kill me. I wouldn't have let that happen." His voice dropped into dangerous territory as his gaze locked on Eli Helton. No, not her. Not the woman who'd solved his sister's disappearance, the woman who'd taken him by surprise herself. Ever. "Even when you still blame me for what happened to Bella?" Tears welled in her eyes and his insides tightened. Hell. What this woman could do to him with a simple look. Bella's alive. He still couldn't believe it. Didn't understand how or why, but none of that mattered right now. Autumn, she mattered. But even if she weren't, I know you didn't have anything to do with her abduction cupcake, and I'm sorry I ever put that weight on your shoulders. Wait! Confusion crinkled the laugh lines around those mesmerizing eyes as Autumn shoved to her feet. "Go back to the part where you said Bella is alive." "I haven't seen her yet, but yes. According to Gage Reed, he'd been sent to kill her, but she convinced him to help her go into hiding instead. And he did. Because he fell in love with her." Bennett stood unable to take his hands off her. If anything, he wanted to hold her tighter and never let her go. "The same way I fell for you." The tears dried the panic vanishing from her expression. Autumn swiped at her face. "You did?" He swallowed hard. Bennett locked his hands around her arms, connecting his gaze with hers. Shifting his balance, he stepped in close. Her body heat tunneling through his t-shirt and sore muscles. He'd been so close to losing the best thing that had ever happened to him. He wouldn't fail her again. "You sacrificed everything to find my sister, even put your own life at risk. I'll never be able to repay you for that, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying." Her gut-wrenching smile flashed wide as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Right where he wanted her. Forever. "I'm sure we can work something out." "Work. Are you ready for this?" Autumn slid her hand over the back of Bennett's fixed on the SUV's gearshift. "To see my sister after a year of believing she was dead?" Bennett locked dark eyes on her, and her heart jerked in her chest. Would it always be this way between them? Heated reactions to the simplest of things. A glance, a touch, a kiss, his nickname for her on his lips. "Not exactly sure how you prepare for something like that. Didn't you say you had to pull bullets from your partner during one of your investigations? How is this scarier?" She shouldered out of the vehicle, hiking her head toward Captain Cook Monument and the vastness of Cook Inlet on the other side. She couldn't help the smile spreading her lips thin as he pushed out of the SUV and rounded the hood to her side. Setting her hand against his chest right over his heart, she raised up on her tiptoes. She slid her other hand around his waist, his shoulder holster scratching down her arm. "Beside, I'll be with you the whole time, I promise. But maybe you should leave the gun. I almost lost you once." His voice dropped low and lethal. His hands were on her hips, then pulling her into him. Dark brown eyes locked on hers, and the past 2 weeks, The investigation, her abduction, Eli Helton, their interrogations, everything disappeared. It was just the two of them there, and they had all the time in the world. I'm not going to let anything happen to you again. The steady rhythm of his heart beneath her palm kept her grounded in the moment. She set her lips against his, closing her eyes, as his warmth chased back dropping temperatures. Is that because you haven't finished working off your debt to me? That's exactly why. His laugh reverberated through her. Light contagious. She wanted nothing more than to hear it again and again. But Bennett wasn't the kind of man who laughed often, despite his sarcastic nature. He'd spent so long obsessed with finding his sister, laughter had taken a back seat in life. She understood that more than most, because she'd experienced the exact same thing. Something they'd have to work on now that the nightmare had ended. Together. Have you given any thought to our conversation? The one where you suggested I become a private investigator? Or the one where we discussed you're not allowed to use my toothbrush because yours fell in the toilet this morning? She asked. Both. He flashed that brilliant smile at her before threading one hand into her hair. He crushed his mouth against hers, almost convincing her to reschedule their meeting. But movement registered from behind the statue as a recently released Gage Reed moved toward them with the brunette beauty at his side. Bella. Bennett broke the kiss, but kept his hand in her hair. Is it too late to cancel? We're going to have plenty of opportunities for a family reunion, right? I think they already saw us. Autumn wiped her mouth with her fingertips as a flood of joy washed through her. Her best friend was alive. She had a new job on the horizon and her very own protector at her side. But it wouldn't hurt to get the car ready.